Israel just went ham on Iran. Today, we're going to learn how Mossad intelligence agents on the ground inside Iran sabotaged their enemy's most precious assets. The gigantic 200 aircraft air campaign overhead, a battle damage assessment of both forces' attacks, and what this might mean for the balance of power in the entire region. Welcome back to Cappy Army. I'm an Iraq veteran and war correspondent. We make weekly videos about wars, weapons, and geopolitics. The first thing you need to know is the Israeli ground sabotage took place in 3 phases. Phase 1 started 8 months ago, when Israeli operatives from Mossad were already inside Iran, living under fake identities. This is when they began work on the mission. For months, they covertly smuggled in drones and explosives through the borders. Ordinary civilian vehicles were then modified in-country so they could launch attack drones. They were attack drone platforms. These disguised, weaponized trucks were then parked at key locations throughout Iran. Each one was placed within 20 kilometers of their target so that they were within range. They were focused on knocking out Iran's SAM sites. This means Israeli intelligence was able to get a fix on the location of Iran's radar network and their anti-air systems, and they were able to penetrate perimeter security to get close enough with these vehicles. So on the morning of Friday the 13th, these drones were activated and they flew out the backs of the vehicles to their targets, destroying air defense assets and crippling Iran's air protection. I would say that this is unlike anything we've ever seen before. I would say that this is unprecedented, but this is literally exactly what we just saw Ukraine did with their drones in Russia like a week ago. Now, phase 2 of the attack, though, makes this very different than what we saw in Russia, because at the same time as all this attack drone tomfoolery was happening inside Iran, a covert group of Israeli Special Forces commandos infiltrated on the ground into central Iran, possibly by stealth helicopters or cargo planes that were seen operating in Syria later that day. The commandos avoided local security as they made their way to the remote locations in the desert. Their mission was to destroy Iranian anti-air missile systems. The soldiers used Spike non-line-of-sight missile launchers, which means those mad lads infiltrated to within 30 kilometers of their target. The team of agents fired these remote-controlled munitions and steered them mid-air straight into the air defense systems, knocking them out. Spike missiles have very little signature when they're fired, meaning they're not that as loud or as much of a thermal signature as some other weapon systems, which allows them to stay undetected. This system is a perfect tool for the job, since it can be launched from indoors and from concealed spots. The fire and forget mode basically allows the operator to accurately guide that round mid-air onto the surface-to-air missile systems that they were targeting. So Spike missiles have a hit probability of over 95%, and they have a margin of error of less than 1 friggin' meter. I had all of that done in 3D and animated, because stuff doesn't make sense to me if I can't see it visually. But these ground attacks were only the beginning phase of this insane operation, because wait till you see what they have cooked up next. If you're someone posting spicy political memes online, your personal information is probably already exposed. This video's sponsor, Delete Me, ran my privacy report and I was freaking shocked. They found 51 pieces of my personal information, including my name, my address, phone number, on 8 different data broker sites, including PeopleWin. Am I allowed to blow those places' names up? Good, fuck them. I mean, seriously, that's my safety we're talking about. I still get death threats from people messaging me that they wish the Kremlin would kill me, and they're trying to dox me for that time that I went into Russia. These places are legit up for sharing that information. Delete Me removed my details, keeping me and my family safe. My privacy advisor got rid of 8 of these listings, and that's time I didn't have to waste digging through sketchy opt-out pages. In total, they saved me about 4.5 hours of work, but really though, the peace of mind is priceless. So fuck these data broker sites with their creepy magnifying glass logo. If you want your data deleted forever, just go to joindeleteme.com/CappyArmy and use code CAPPY to get 20% off. Links in the description. Back to the episode. I know some people prefer to have some IRL proof. Since then, we've learned Iran is warning that these vehicles are what Mossad used. We also believe that they used pickup trucks, smaller vehicles than basically what we saw in Ukraine. So we can see here, actual thermal video footage was released by Israel of their commandos on the ground in Iran using night vision goggles and what appears to be thermal blankets that conceals their thermal signature if they were going to be spotted by Iranian security forces. The fact that Israel released this video footage of their spies operating on Iranian soil is for a reason, I think. Normally, spy agencies bend all the way over backwards to keep their sources and methods under wraps. The likely reason that they chose to reveal this because they wanted to show how ineffective Iran's security is and how they operate with impunity. These agents could have exfiltrated out of there, because I'm always curious about, you go to one of the most dangerous spots, how do you get out of there? I get that they got into there, but how do you get out? So it might have been by helicopter, since Iran's air defense maybe couldn't have picked them up like they did with the Syrian missile-based raid that they conducted about a year ago. So it's possible cargo aircraft could have picked them up. We saw them flying over Syria the next day. Maybe they recovered them. It appears to me and everyone watching that Israel's going for full-on raw dog regime change. All right, let's go into phase 3 of the ground sabotage. It's probably the most insane of them all. Since at least 2024, Israeli undercover agents have been working on secretly building a kamikaze drone base inside the heart of the city of Tehran. So they didn't even put it in a mobile launcher site. They were just building it under their noses, right on their soil the whole time. This was carefully placed right on the outskirts of the city. They call it a base, but it was likely a house, and almost certainly in violation of their HOA. Inside the house, there were attack drones programmed to fly at the nearby Iranian base of Esfeh Jabad. This is one of the most well-protected, highly sensitive bases, because it's where they have a number of their long-range ballistic missile launchers. The drones were remotely activated by agents in the middle of the night, at around 3 a.m. They struck the missile base, and then additional kamikaze drones appear to have targeted high-value generals and scientists living in Tehran. Israel tricked some of Iran's top commanders into gathering in the same place for a meeting. They did this by studying their movement patterns, and then they were able to eliminate them all in this way, according to Israel at least. The goal was to nerf Iran's retaliatory capabilities. The explosive one-way drones targeted surface-to-surface missiles that were going to retaliate against Israel, based on what they'd seen happen in the past. This sabotage took them a year to smuggle commandos and weaponry through their borders. This paved the way for what would happen next. Once Iran's air defense had been hit hard, a massive coordinated air campaign involving 200 Israeli fighter jets attacked. Israel deployed a mix of F-35s, F-16s, and F-15s. They likely traveled through Syria, which right now has limited to no air defense. The F-35s used external fuel tanks likely to extend their range at the cost of stealth. They launched GBU-31 500-pound JDAM precision bombs designed to hit specific targets. In total, they fired something like 330 munitions so far from the air. Now, that was an old estimate as well, so it's probably much higher now. Their special forces had destroyed the city's air defense. The jets had air superiority. They could operate with impunity. There was reportedly very little activity seen from Iranian air defense. The Israeli Air Force reportedly flew SEAD missions, which are suppression of air defense, so they destroyed around a dozen radars, and then we'll get into the battle damage assessment later of how many air defense systems were destroyed, but it's a friggin' lot. The fighter jets were able to penetrate deep into Iranian airspace and launch their standoff missiles at individual targets. These could have been fired from up to about 400 kilometers or 250 miles away and could have hit individual buildings. The F-35s hit residential apartment buildings in Tehran, which is an escalation compared to what we've seen happen in the past. Nuclear facilities and missile production bases were hit. Over 100 different targets inside Iran were hit during 5 waves of airstrikes. This hit the Natanz nuclear site and targeted their ballistic missile sites at Bid Kana. That's where several of their missile development and production facilities are located. Here on the map, you can see all the locations that were confirmed to be hit. This has been the first few days in what we anticipate will very likely, very possibly be a weeks-long air campaign of multiple sorties by Israel and Iran, according to word from their officials. The Institute for the Study of War stated, "Strikes that destroy components of Iran's air defense systems will cause a temporary disruption to Iranian defenses that would enable Israeli fourth-generation, non-stealthy aircraft to operate in Iranian airspace with greater ease." Israeli officials claim to have full control of the airspace, without a single Iranian jet being scrambled in response, because their air force is essentially non-existent. For many years, the popular saying has always been that amateurs talk tactics, while experts talk logistics. But now the line between logistics and tactics have been blurred. I think we're seeing the weaponization of transportation systems unlike anything we've seen before in military history. Let's talk about where Iran's air defense is at, because Iran started firing old school, antiquated anti-air flak into the sky. So it looks like a picture that wouldn't be out of place in World War II. Their most common type of anti-aircraft gun is the Zu-23 male cannon. Can fire 3 kilometers out, but Israeli fighter jets firing glide bombs fly higher than that and would be definitely out of range. Iran claimed that they'd shot down 2 Israeli F-35s so far, though. So far, we haven't seen evidence yet. So let's be honest. Let's not mince words. This is, I think, theatrical. It's for the Iranian leadership to make a show of force for their people on the ground who might not understand otherwise that this anti-aircraft flak fire is ineffective. But it's about it. Seeing flak instead of anti-air missiles going up into the sky is some visual evidence that air defense was destroyed by the Israeli ground sabotage. Iran claimed that they'd shot down 2 Israeli F-35s so far, though. So far, we haven't seen evidence yet. So far, all we've seen is one uncorroborated, fake, computer-generated AI image that has a combination of F-16, F-35, different parts that reveal that it's not real. But what about the battle damage assessment so far? Satellite and radar images are coming in immediately because there was no cloud cover. Initial information suggests they targeted about 25 of Iran's nuclear scientists. It appears like at least 6 of them were killed. Their whole high-up leadership was targeted, and at least 30 senior Iranian commanders have been killed so far. 40 Iranian air defense systems have reportedly been destroyed since the start of the operation. Israel released multiple videos of Iran's ballistic missile launchers getting destroyed by their ground operators. This could explain why it took multiple volleys throughout the day for Iran to reach 150 missiles fired at Israel, when they normally fire them all at once. The commander of the Revolutionary Guard and military chief of staff were both confirmed dead by Iran themselves. Take a look at their military command structure to give you an idea of how devastating this has been for Iran. This is meant to create a leadership vacuum that made quick retaliation more difficult. What's escalated and different here compared to some of the attacks we've seen in the past is they targeted these generals and scientists at their residential homes in Iran. The Iranian government confirmed the deaths of these high-value leadership and that 78 people were killed, including over 320 wounded in the Israeli attacks, according to Iran. They claim the majority were civilians. So one of the things that stuck out to me as really interesting is what we're not seeing as much as what we are seeing. It's shocking that we haven't seen or even heard from Hamas or Hezbollah, these proxy forces of Iran that in the past have been the type of forces that would launch attacks on Israel normally in a situation like this. And what about the Iranian retaliation so far? The fact that Iran is now targeting Israel's population centers and residential areas is an escalation compared to what we've seen in the past. A few apartment buildings were hit, and then another volley later on ended with Israel's military headquarters getting struck. It's called the Kiryat, which is like their version of the American Pentagon. A war correspondent on the ground in Israel, Trey Yingst, said, quote, "An entire block nearly completely destroyed. wiped off the map. So far, 150 Iranian ballistic missiles were fired, which is similar to past attacks that they've done on Israel before in terms of volume. At least 7 of the missiles avoided air defense interceptors and hit the ground and impacted. Video evidence shows some of the missiles were intercepted though. In the past, Iran only fired missiles at Israel's military bases. The attacks weren't that accurate because hitting a plane with a ballistic missile, hitting a plane-sized target is much more difficult than hitting, say, an entire city. So they were able to kill at least 3 Israeli citizens, and over 40 people were wounded, according to Israeli officials so far. My personal assessment of the attack so far have been that Iran has been unable to inflict similar strategic blows to Israel so far compared to what they've received. This could change tomorrow. Israel began targeting Iran's economic sector, hitting their oil fields, which is something they haven't done in the past. It's an escalation that they said they would do if their population centers were hit. It's important to note this all started with what Israel calls their Begin Doctrine. Israel officially drew a line in the desert sand and made it policy, a principle, that they won't allow an enemy state to acquire nuclear weapons, and since then they've bombed Syria's nuclear reactor and now Iran's. So what has the American response been so far? 2 U.S. naval destroyers are assisting with shooting down Iran's missiles, alongside multiple American Patriot batteries that have been moved into position in recent months, as we've talked about, and THAAD anti-air launchers are also in position. This could explain why the U.S. diverted some 20,000 interceptors from Ukraine to go to the Middle East for U.S. troops instead a few weeks ago. It's confirmed that American fighter jets are now patrolling the skies in the Middle East region. They're now on station overhead, protecting U.S. troops and facilities. And I think this is a major hint as to why Israel was even able to consider this attack. This is just my personal opinion, and you guys can tell me what you think, but it looks like to me that the type of targets that Israel went after here suggests that their goal was to weaken the entire Iranian government. If Israel doesn't have the military capability, the bunker-busting bombs necessary, the 30,000-pound variant of it, to completely destroy Iran's deeply buried nuclear program, then their best bet would be to delegitimize the Iranian government. Their best bet would be to take out senior leadership to show the world that Iran has no credible deterrence. It's possible the diplomatic dance over the past few weeks has been tailored to the attack as well. We don't have confirmation on when the U.S. government knew these Israeli strikes were imminent, and we don't know if possibly the ongoing negotiations were used to provide a disguise to trick Iran in the final days into thinking that talks would continue into Sunday, because the top U.S. envoy to the negotiations had planned a 6th round of talks on Sunday. 6 rounds. Maybe if they'd gone to 12 rounds of talks, it would have resolved. The 7th time's the charm. Was Iran really building a nuclear weapon? Israel says they were creating a crude warhead. Personally, if you ask me, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna need more evidence than trust me, bro. Just because it wasn't true about Iraq 20 years ago doesn't mean it's necessarily a CIA lie again today. But I'm certainly going to need a whole lot more evidence if you want me to believe it today. We know that the US's own intelligence assessments continue to say that Iran was not pursuing an active nuclear weaponization program as of now. How the heck did Israeli covert agents smuggle all those weapon systems into the country? Based on past Mossad operations, we know that foreign passports a lot of times are used from European countries so they can plant agents inside Iran. We know that in the 2010s, Mossad agents entered Iran as regular old business people, journalists, or aid workers, and they would build cover stories for years prior to going there. These agents are then used to coordinate local assets. So they'll find people inside Iran that are sympathetic to their cause or that hate the current regime. They provide on-the-ground recon, and they move the contraband drones and explosives over time, bit by bit. Previous covert actions used fake plumbing equipment, car parts, and appliances to smuggle in weapons. So they would disassemble the drones, the explosives, the launchers, and ship them separately. Then they would reassemble them in Iran. Add to that the fact that tools like 3D printers mean they could create parts in the country easily. Mossad has historically partnered with anti-regime ethnic minorities, like you got the Kurds in the northwest and the Baloch rebels in the southeast. These groups control parts of the porous borders with Iraq, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Is there a threat of drone attacks of these type from deep inside American soil? Is that a serious concern? It's possible, yes. This threat is more likely a problem for America's military bases abroad, though. And personally, I think it could explain why we saw drones going near military bases in places like New Jersey. They may have been running training operations to see if they could defeat against this type of attack that was being planned all around the world. Personally, I think it's kind of crazy how drones were able to in both Russia and Iran in just a matter of weeks. So I'm always curious, what is the US Army doing about this massive change with drone warfare? If you're interested in learning about how the American recon teams are planning to use kamikaze drones to defeat China, you could check out this video that we made here. As always, if you want exclusive content, the full show notes and sources for this episode, you can find them on cappyarmy.com, link in the description. Thank you again to Delete Me for sponsoring this episode. Greatly appreciate their support, and we encourage you to check them out as well. Thank you guys for watching. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy, ending transmission now.